Final shape is just around the corner and prepping is in full swing. And one of the most common questions people have for this time of year is, will Dano clean my vault? Wait, hold on. Does Shaxx have a dump truck? Sorry. Here it is. What weapons should I get or save for the final shape? Well, let's talk about it. We're going to break down a detailed list of weapons you should either try to farm out, gamble on, or at the very least keep in your vault for final shape launch. To make things easier and more consistent, I'm going to break down these lists into 4 categories. Number 1 is crafted weapons. Number 2 is non-craftable weapons that are good to look out for. Number 3 is exotic weapons you should invest in getting if you have not already. And lastly, number 4 is going to be honorable mentions. This list will include weapons that are all good in their own right in some way, but are either not at the top of the meta, or just have a niche use case, or are criminally hard to obtain, but can still be on your radar just in case. Last thing, since we're going to be talking about a ton of weapons here, the background footage you'll be seeing will likely just be footage of builds that I've used, or perhaps some boss memes. I'm still going to talk about what makes the weapon good, and I'll still pull up which weapon or weapons I'm talking about for you guys as a screenshot, but I don't think people would like to just stare at the menu screen for an entire video. So at least this way, you'll see some explosions in the background. That said, let's get into it. The first category is going to be crafted weapons. Kicking off the list is going to be the only primary weapon here, which is Zuli's Bane. With the recent changes to hand cannons in the PvE sandbox, Zuli's has quickly risen to the top in primary use. Now granted, we currently have Season of the Solar going on and making everything explode, but I do believe that this hand cannon will still hold up even after this artifact is long gone. Also, thanks to Pantheon, you can get yourself a guaranteed Harrowed Zuli's on top of being able to get red borders from King's Fall as well. Next, let's shift into a different raid, Vow the Disciple. This raid has 2 weapons that have been at the top of the mountain for quite some time, and they are still 2 of the better weapons in all of Destiny. The 2 weapons in question are going to be Forbearance and Cataclysmic. Now, it's worth mentioning that Forbearance is also available to farm in Onslaught, although a slightly different version of it. The OG Forbearance will still have the Soul Drinker Origin trait, which is arguably worth getting on its own. In any case, regardless of which version of Forbearance you want to go after, this waveframe is, and still will be, a fantastic wave-clearing machine come final shape, and yes, that is including the nerf that I'll be taking with Chain Reaction being hit by Bungie. As for Cataclysmic, pretty much since its inception, it's been the gold standard for linear fusion rifles in the game. As soon as people realized how great Bait and Switch was, it didn't come off of people's loadouts for a solid year. Even now, despite the game being in a Rocket and GL meta, Cataclysmic is still a fantastic option in certain content in the game, thanks to having one of the best damage perks in the game with Bait and Switch, but also being one of the few good weapons to get ammo out of thin air, thanks to 4 times the charm. And with that, it becomes a great ammo-efficient weapon as well, on top of great damage. Just like Zuli's, Cataclysmic can also be obtained through Pantheon and also bought from the completion chest with your spoils. You should go get one if you have spoils ready to go. While we're on the subject of great damage, let's talk about what shifted the meta from linears, and it starts with the Last Wish craftable weapons. First up is Apex Predator from Last Wish. Originally, arguably the worst rocket launcher to ever exist in this franchise. Apex Predator now sits as one of the best rockets in the game, only realistically being challenged by a certain dungeon rocket we'll talk about a little later. Apex Predator, much like Cataclysmic, takes advantage of bait and switch and ammo refunding, except this time, it's typically paired with reconstruction, and this allows you to weapon hot swap between your rocket and your other weapons, then swap them back to Apex for the ammo refund and keep going with DPS. And you know what else can comically refund ammo? The sniper from this raid, which is Supremacy. This sniper went from mediocrity to stud overnight, allowing you to go the routes of great sustainable damage, or being a complete meme lord and shooting 64 shots into Oryx's chest consecutively. It has great perks like Triple Tap, 4 times the Charm, Bait and Switch, and Kinetic Tremors, and is a fantastic option to craft. Now, Apex and Supremacy can not only be crafted through Last Wish, but can also be obtained through Ribbon's wishes from Mara Sov at the helm, which you would directly go to pick up 7 wishes, and this way you can get up to 7 red borders if you complete all of the wishes. So if you haven't already, use your wishes on these 2 weapons. Alright, we have one more raid to talk about, and wouldn't you know it, this also applies to Pantheon, and that is the Deep Stone Crypt raid. This raid is home to several great weapons, but for now, we're going to eye 3 of them, and they are Succession, Bequest, and Commemoration. Now, in Succession's case, just like Forbearance, you're able to get this through Onslaught, just with a different origin trait, but it's much more negligible than with Soul Drinker. Succession is one of the best legendary snipers in the game with the standard combo of Reconstruction and Firing Line. It's also going to get a buff in damage in Final Shape, so whether you are doing Deep Stone, Pantheon, or Onslaught, try to get one of these ASAP. The other two weapons are going to be Commemoration and Bequest. For Commemoration, it's pretty simple. It's one of the best ad-clearing machine guns in the game, with Reconstruction or Subsistence, plus Killing Tally. Now, I won't say it's a god-tier weapon, but I would say it's a good option to craft for down the road. Bequest, on the other hand, is absolutely god tier in its category. I've been screaming about this weapon from the rooftops for years before people started catching on finally by using it on Crota. Bequest is the best legendary sword. It, along with Lament, which is an exotic, by the way, has the second highest impact stat in the game with 70. The highest is Thorn Cleaver at 72. However, Bequest has a swing speed of 40, and Thorn Cleaver has 0. Yeah, literally 0. So as far as I'm concerned, Bequest clears. It also has the best damage perk currently in the entire game with Surrounded, and you can enhance that. And based on Bungie's continuous additions of Mobius in endgame content, I expect Surrounded in general and swords to continue to shine wherever they're usable in such situations like the Crota boss fight. And finally, we've arrived at our last crafted weapon. This last one is actually not a raid weapon, but instead a seasonal weapon from Season of the Wish and currently obtainable through Riven and the Coil activity, and this is Doomed Petitioner. So Doomed Petitioner possesses a new perk called Precision Instrument, which states that with every precision hit, damage increases, and this goes up to a max of 6 stacks. Now, normally you'd think 6 shots to get to max damage for a buff? I don't know about that. However, Doomed Petitioner is a 3-burst shot linear, which means every time that you charge a shot, you're getting 3 crits for the price of 1 shot. In other words, after just 2 linear shots, you will hit the max stack for the damage buff, and this perk is tied with Bait and Switch as a 30% damage buff, only trailing Surrounded as a higher buff. But guess what? This linear can also roll Surrounded, so it quite literally has the 2 best damage perks in the game as far as I'm concerned. This, along with great support perks like Envious Assassin and Reconstruction, make it pound for pound one of, if not the best linear fusion rifle in the game. That covers the craftables. Now let's swing into the non-craftable side of things. I'm going to try to break this down into subcategories to make it a bit more digestible. The first 4 weapons to mention here are going to be Blast Furnace, Elsie's Rifle, Fallen Guillotine, and Edge Transit. Now, I'm sure you see the theme here already. They're all Onslaught weapons, which means a few things. First, they're all easily obtainable and farmable. Second, in the case of Blast Furnace and Elsie's Rifle, Pulse Rifles will be getting a very nice buff heading into Final Shape, and will potentially be on par with hand cannons for red bar level enemies, on paper at least. So with that in mind, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to get yourself one of these for PvE. I'm personally a fan of Kinetic Tremors and Firefly for Blast Furnace, and then Weeble rounds with Desperate Measures for Elsie's. Then we're left with Falling Guillotine and Edge Transit. Remember how I mentioned Bequest is the best legendary sword? Well, if there was going to be a sword to contend it, that would be the new Brave Arsenal Guillotine. It's able to roll unique double damage perk combinations such as Vorpal, Frenzy, Surrounded, Bait and Switch, and Desperate Measures. It also has Ad Clear and utility perks such as Chain Reaction and Eager Edge. Oh, did I mention that since it's a Brave weapon, you can get a shiny version of this with up to 4 damage perks on your sword? Yeah, it's worth getting. It's a good one. As for Edge Transit, listen, I'm not even going to try to sell you on this thing. Edge Transit is quite literally one of the most, if not the most busted heavy weapon in Destiny 2 right now. If you've seen any of my Edge Transit shorts or my Edge Transit versus Raid Bosses video, you'll know that this thing is basically unstoppable. Get yourself an Edge Transit with Envious plus Bait and Switch, and maybe an extra copy with Cascade and or auto-loading along with Bait and Switch for good measure. One small note before we move on here, I do want to mention that Cataphract, the Trials GL, is very similar to Edge Transit in having Envious and Bait and Switch. If you happen to have a god roll of this, great. If you don't, and have engrams to burn at Saint 14, I'd recommend you do it on Cataphract. Now, would I recommend that you risk your sanity playing Trials instead of getting Edge Transit? No, I would not. Moving along, these last couple weapons are going to be a combination of either World Drop, Vanguard Drop, or a farmable weapon that you just have to get lucky with, and I'll briefly explain why they are good, so here we go. Rosarago is a World Drop auto rifle that, in my opinion, is the king of autos at the moment, and it's probably the best auto rifle perk in the game in Onslaught, and has several good support perks in Repulsor Brace, Subsistence, and Weeble Wounds. Put this thing on with a volatile Void build, like on a Hunter with Drift Falcons, and you'll never take it off. Next, Crux Termination, another World Drop that is outright the best arc rocket currently in the game, in my opinion anyway, and it also has the best damage perk in the game with Surrounded. Now some of you might say, but Sneak, Apex has Surrounded, and yes, that is true. However, besides being a different affinity, Crux also has perks that Apex does not, such as Envious Assassin or Slide Shot, not to be confused with the Walmart brand Slideways. This allows you to basically never have to manually reload and lets you mag dump all your rockets while having the best damage perk. A great example for this would be at Heffend, where you're always surrounded but can still slide and hit the boss very easily. Now we're going to dive into the Vanguard portion. This is going to be about Warden's Law and Wendigo. Warden's Law has risen to popularity due to its god tier damage output, specifically in ties with Lucky Pants, although the weapon is good on its own too. While Lucky Pants is active, it's essentially the best primary in the game, and is only kept up with by another hand cannon, which we'll mention in the exotic section. Unfortunately, the only way to be able to get Warden's Law right now would be through the Vanguard engrams if you have the regular version already unlocked. If you do, I would dump your engrams into that. Otherwise, sadly, you'll have to wait for Final Shape and have Warden's Law come around in the Nightfall rotation if you want to get an Adept one. Wendigo, for lack of a better term, is just an Arc-flavored Edge Transit, but a little bit worse. It's very handy for Arc Surge-based activities, such as when Master, Dungeon, and Raids roll around to an Arc Burn. It has Autoloading and Clown as its support perks, with Explosive Light as your main damage perk. So if you have engrams to burn and you don't have the option of going for Warden's Law, I would go for Wendigo. And now for the last two weapons in this category, Cold Comfort and Indebted Kindness. Both of these weapons are absolute monsters in their own right. Cold Comfort is arguably the best rocket in Destiny 2. Just like Apex Predator, it has Bait and Switch as its main damage perk. However, Cold Comfort has a few things that Apex does not. The first of which is Envious Assassin, which lets you just stack up your rockets ahead of time and doesn't require any swapping during the damage phase. And the other advantage that it has is its origin trait, Restoration Ritual, which is in simple terms going to let you hold an extra rocket to shoot in your mag once you run out of rockets, and all you have to do to proc it is either get a revive of a teammate or just do a finisher on any enemy before firing your rockets. It is very powerful and incredibly easy to set up. The only problem with this is how you farm it, which is inside the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon, home to some of the tankiest bosses in the game. If you don't have the stomach for it, Apex is also a fine replacement to this. As for Indebted Kindness, it is truly one of a kind. It's a weapon that has the ammo of a sidearm, but the damage of a small rocket. It can roll Volt Shot, which has a much stronger burst AoE than a primary with Volt Shot, and it has two great support perks in Beacon Rounds, which is basically giving you legal aimbot, and then Let From Gold, which will give you an insane amount of ammo back anytime that you pick up any heavy ammo. While this weapon isn't craftable and has to be farmed, the good news is you can farm it from the first boss of Warlord's Ruin, who's pretty much a pushover with any decent team. Whew, okay, still here? Great, hope you brought a snack. Let's move into exotics. These are going to be short and straight to the point. They all have a place in the game and do their job well. None of these are bad choices to have, and you can freely dump your exotic ciphers into any of these without it being a bad choice, or in some cases, choosing the correct raid exotic. First in the lineup, the MAF class special, Outbreak Perfected. The best go-to weapon in the game when staring down a boss fight with no ammo remaining. Your whole team swaps to this, and you'll nuke the boss with nanites, albeit 6 minutes late. This was made craftable and available to everyone through the 0-hour mission, so absolutely go get it before it's too late. Touch of Malice. This one falls into the same category as Outbreak Perfected, although you need some form of healing to make it really work, like Well of Radiance, Healing Rifts, and so on. This is normally a raid exotic from King's Fall. However, you can also choose to get it through Pantheon from our site at the end of the mission, thanks to Shax's quest, although it would be my second choice behind our next weapon. Conditional Finality, another weapon that is obtainable through a Pantheon quest or through the Root of Nightmares raid. Legitimately one of the most fun exotics in Destiny, period. And it's one of the best shotguns as well. It's great in both PvE and PvP, and arguably a must-have. Next up, Malfeasance. This is the only thing that is stopping Warden's Law from having one-sided dominance in the Lucky Pants War of 2024. Malfeasance is a great option with Lucky Pants, but it's an exotic instead of a legendary like Warden's Law, and it becomes even more lethal when you're fighting Taken enemies, and given that the Witness sends Taken after us non-stop, it's an easy choice to pick up. Izanagi's Burden. It's a sniper rifle, but can shoot 4 bullets at once. All kidding aside, this weapon has been a go-to weapon for bait and switch loadouts and hot swapping loadouts for literal years. It's another easy pickup for good damage. Witherhoard. Just like my allergies, it always comes back. The gold standard in DOT passive damage in the game. It's not the best option, but it's a good build crafting weapon to have for loadouts, such as Starfire loadouts, which still exist, by the way, believe it or not. Agar Scepter, one of the most criminally underrated weapons ever. This thing is more underrated than Costco hot dogs. It's a crowd control god, it has a sick catalyst perk, which then turns it into a DPS weapon that also overfills its magazine to let you keep shooting until either your super bar is gone or all your ammo is gone. Must have, case closed. Forerunner. Now, normally, I would say this weapon wouldn't be on the list. However, with the recent showing of Tormentors in Pantheon, I think it's very clear that Bungie is not afraid to just throw these MFers at us non-stop. And Forerunner is a direct counter to Tormentors. It is a weapon that deals bonus damage to unshielded enemies, but not only that, it's also a very easy option to break Tormentor's shoulders, and on top of that, it will stagger Tormentors with ease. I imagine this will be a great choice for the Final Shape campaign. Sunshot. What do I really need to say about Sunshot? Take what I said about Zuli's Bane at the start of the video, and then multiply it by 10. Sunshot is disgusting. But just keep in mind, if you're a new player, the only way to get Sunshot currently, as far as I know at the moment, is through Xur's exotic engrams. So keep an eye out for him if you haven't already. Ariana's Vow. This one is actually just a prediction call for me. Ariana's will be getting a buff in the Final Shape to cause ignitions on shield breaks, which is exactly what I hoped it would get. All aboard the Ariana Explosion World Tour. Next is Divinity. I don't think much needs to be said about this one. It makes a giant cage around an enemy that lets everyone get guaranteed headshots no matter what, and gives you a 15% debuff to work with. Absolutely a must-have. Now, Whisper of the Worm. Dear Lord, this thing cooks. Whisper has taken a backseat in Destiny for quite a while due to the several nerfs that it and snipers got in general years past, but in recent times, snipers have gotten some substantial buffs to both damage and ammo, and in Final Shape, snipers will once more get a damage buff increase, and this will apply to Whisper as well, which, by the way, is currently craftable through the Whisper Exotic mission, so get it as soon as possible. Tractor Cannon. Now this one is just a gimme, and mostly for new players. It's a weapon that is a 30% debuff to any enemy, and it's completely free to get for anyone. Just head to the Cosmodrome and look for the chest near the doorway by Shah Han, and you'll get Tractor Cannon. Thunderlord. Oh boy, I'm sure this one won't piss anyone off. I'll make this short and sweet. Thunderlord is a great gimmick weapon for teams that struggle with hot swapping, rocket swapping, GL swapping, and so on, and it's completely free to get in the Hall of Champions next to Shaxx. Go pick it up and just ignore the haters. Gjallarhorn. If you happen to own the 30th Anniversary Pack, this is basically a must-have. It is literally the best support for legendary rocket launchers in the game and buffs their damage substantially. Go do Grass of Avarice and go get this rocket launcher. Finally, our last two exotics on here are both Season Pass exotics, and they both cook, for one of them in the literal sense. These are Grand Overture and Dragon's Breath. Now, Grand Overture is highly slept on as a weapon that a lot of people just write off immediately because they don't see its burst potential. And it works fantastic in boss encounters like Atrax, Caretaker, so it's definitely a solid pickup. Dragon's Breath, on the other hand, is just in a class of its own in uniqueness. Not only does Dragon's Breath blow everything up, it also provides fantastic damage on every enemy type, including bosses. And on top of that, it provides ignition damage, which in turn gives you big chunks of super regen to get your super quicker. This can be looped in combination with Solar Warlocks and Hunters to make absolutely absurd super regen spamming builds for endgame content. Dragon's Breath is a guaranteed pickup. If you own Season of the Witch, just pull it from your pass, and you won't regret it. Alright, breathe, we're in the final stretch. Lastly, let's briefly do some honorable mentions that you can currently get in the game. If you can get them, great. They're very serviceable or even great weapons. If you can't, it's not going to be the end of the world. Let's start with SMGs. Recluse and Subjunctive, two of the best currently obtainable and farmable SMGs in the game. Subjunctive is also craftable, by the way. It's just a shame that it's permanently ugly forever, so if you value fashion, then you might not want it. Lastly, Parabellum is also another SMG to look out for, specifically with Heal Clip and Incandescent. It's unfortunately a world drop, so just keep an eye out on it when you play the game. Tyranny of Heaven and Lethophobia are two of the best farmable / craftable bows you can get in the game right now. Tyranny of Heaven is craftable through Last Wish and the Ribbon tokens that I mentioned earlier, and Lethophobia is craftable through Ribbon and the Coil. You should get these if you want a good bow. Wastelander and Swordbreaker. These are two of the best easily accessible 1-2 punch shotguns that you can get in the game to go along with your Arc Hunter or your Strand Titan. Wastelander is obtainable and craftable through Dares of Eternity, while Swordbreaker is obtainable and craftable from the Crotas and Raid. Mountaintop. This one is a tad unfortunate. Mountaintop has the potential to be a great weapon and an interesting tech choice for rocket jumping in Destiny for speedruns, but it's also seemingly getting a big nerf in Final Shape due to weapon changes in the game, so I thought I would throw it into the honorable mention section. Next is Hand Cannon City. We've got Midnight Coup and Fatebringer. These two are basically the Spider-Man meme where you just point at each other. Yeah, they're both used for the same thing, really. They both roll very similar perks, and these are considered to be the god roll in Firefly, plus Frenzy, or Explosive Payload. Now, Midnight-Coup is farmable in Onslaught, while Fatebringer can be a guaranteed god roll drop if you complete the Templar boss fight with challenge mode on Master in the Vault of Glass raid. Moving from hand cannons, for this next part, here are some fusion rifles. All of them are great for one reason or another. Get or keep any of these if you can. Techie Enforce, which is a craftable weapon from Last Switch, is a great arc fusion rifle to have, one of the best in the game, with Controlled Burst as its main perk. Cartesian Coordinate, which is routinely sold by Banshee, is a great solar weapon option. Just look out for that occasionally on daily resets. Also, in the solar category, we have Eremite, which is a craftable solar fusion from Eris, currently via Season of the Witch. It's similar to Cartesian, although it shoots slower, so it depends what situation you're in, such as quick burst DPS option or damage over time. Now, if you can't get Techie Enforce in time for Final Shape for one reason or another, a good replacement also is Loaded Question. It's a fusion rifle that is arced from the Vanguard / Nightfall farming, so if you have it unlocked already, you can use engrams to get extra copies, or maybe you already have an Adept Loaded Question good to go. And finally, we have two more fusions to talk about. One is Strand, and one is Stasis. You probably already know what the Stasis one is. It's Riptide. Riptide is one of the best fusions in the game, just for being able to utilize Chill Clip, which is a multi-stun weapon for champions. It's also a good utility weapon right now, being able to just put a Stasis debuff on any enemy, and thanks to the artifact, we get a free damage buff on enemies just through that. Now, as for our last weapon, we have Scatter Signal, a Strand fusion rifle, which is craftable through Ribbon and the Coil this season, and it has the unique combination of being able to roll Controlled Burst with Slice. So you have a great damage perk and also a damage reduction perk. These are both fantastic, and if you get them, great. I will also say that if you can't get Riptide because you just, don't want to play Crucible, then you can also get Deliverance from the Vow Disciple raid. It is a stasis weapon that can shoot Chill Clip as well, although it shoots a bit slower, and I like Riptide over it personally. As for honorable mentions in exotics, let's do a lightning round. Polaris Lance is a monster thanks to the current artifact. Not so sure about future content, but it's worth a pickup eventually. Risk Runner. This is the I'm fighting arc-based enemies, let me put this on to take less damage exotic. Sleeper Simulant. It hits like a truck, could be useful in niche scenarios going forward. Xenophage. It's an Onslaught and Gambit Olympic Overlord MVP, and also great for wave-based content and maybe some Vanguard content too. Leviathan's Breath. Similar to Sleeper, it hits like a truck, but void-flavored. Also has the potential to stun-lock enemies, including bosses. Lament. It's a chainsaw. What else do you want me to say? No, but really, it's a good sword, although the nerfs in Final Shape might knock it down a notch. Parasite. This is one of the sneakiest exotics in the game for damage, particularly on hunters. Also, you can make a 6th grader joke about throwing your worm in the enemy's face, so there's that. And finally, Cloud Strike. It's Thunderlord, but worse. But it's also a sniper, which does good damage, and as mentioned before, snipers are getting buffed in the Final Shape, so it's worth a pickup. And that concludes my yapping session on weapons you can prep for the Final Shape expansion. For the troopers that made it to the end, thanks for watching all of that. I hope that you enjoyed the video. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow, and is much appreciated as we are on the way to 40k. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can also leave a like and or comment down below. If you don't know what to leave as a comment, you can leave weapons as the comment. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.